welcome to a very special episode of Kaiju Showcase. Damn it, KMR. Been doing too many fucking toy reviews.
Gamera from
Godzilla is probably the world's most recognizable kaiju. What with 28 films under his belt, a Japanese and American television show, cameo appearances, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and multiple statues. Aside from respect and admiration, Goji has also gained quite a few imitators as well, from Yongari, Gorgo, and the American Not Godzilla, to local boys like Gilala, Agon, and Rego. But Gojira's biggest competition is a monster we are very familiar with on this show. Unfortunately, Gamera hasn't had the same luck as his rival when it comes to quality, but that was mainly in the early days. However, the 90s trilogy of films can show you how a seemingly washed-up character can be brought back and done with style. Now, I've only looked at the first two films so far, but could the third film possibly be any better than the previous two? Well, we're about to find out when we dive into Gamera 3, Iris Kakuse, aka Gamera 3, Impossible Struggle. How many different ways could you possibly start a Gamera movie? Well, quite a lot, I imagine. How about having a distressed villager beating a dead Gauss with a hoe? Surely not the first thing that comes to my mind, but that's how we begin. We are then treated to a young girl, Ayane, having a flashback to 1995 when Gamera battled Gauss in Tokyo. Relate back to my review of the first film in this trilogy if you want to know more. During the battle, she witnesses her home being crushed by Gamera with her parents still inside. The ordeal causes Ayane untold mental damage and gives her a great hatred of turtles, specifically giant ones. Her little brother seems to be a bully magnet, as Ayane must enter an old shrine and recover an artifact, so said bullies will leave her sibling alone. She discovers a stone which is not supposed to be moved. Doing so reveals a rock which looks a bit like an egg. Speaking of eggs, Miss Nagamine has been keeping herself quite busy since the first film. She works for the government researching ways to stop the increasing Gauss population and the dramatic rate the creatures have been evolving, along with doing other work regarding Gamera and any other kaiju I imagine that pop up. Oh, and of course our villains, if you want to call them that, make their appearance as well. Asakura Mito and Kurata Shinji, but more on those two later. One last worthwhile character to mention before shit starts blowing up is Inspector Osako, who is no longer an inspector for those of you who have been following the last two Gamera films. He's fallen even further, going from a night security guard to a booze hound that sells magazines and papers on the street. So, Mr. Osako is chilling, knocking back a cold one, when we get a motherfucking Gauss attack. Well, not really. Gamera is pursuing two Gauss who just happen to be flying over the Shibuya district. Super Turtle smacks one of those bitches down and fucking BAM! In a plume of fire, and the second one is soon to follow. The funny thing is when you look at Gamera's almost complete disregard for innocence near the battlefield when this is going on. And again, a little more on that later. All this kaiju-related activity has triggered the egg in the shrine to open. Ayane catches a news report about the damage in Shibuya, which causes her emo Gamera rage to spike, and she returns to the old shrine. Inside, she finds the egg destroyed and a small talisman, similar to the one that appeared in the first two films. On the side note, she does find a monster that she names Squishums, or rather, that's what I would have named it. It's actually Iris. Next, we are given a scene of Ayane bonding with Iris, and establishing Iris' connection to the Gauss and their collective hatred of flying turtleoids. Gamera's credibility with the Japanese people begins to waver, as the government and a number of Japanese citizens consider him a threat because of the incident in Shibuya. Iris begins to grow and change, going as far as absorbing Ayane into it. As you can see, Gamera really has his work cut out for him, what with an ever-strengthening Iris and the growing Gauss population. What fate will befall Gammy, and what about Ayane? Well, you guys are just going to have to watch the movie to find out. The cast of characters in this movie is large and deep. For the most part. The characters are as well written as ever, with clever and thought-provoking dialogue. Again, for the most part. which is something you can rarely say about these kinds of films. Most of the people that appear in this movie have been talked about before, and they all stay true to their character. While there are some new additions like Misa Sakura and Kurata Shinji, which you might see as human antagonists, both of which have a strange fetish for Gauss and the occult, which gives us a nice contrast to the Gamera is our hero group. Their presence in the film, despite their odd nature, is a welcome addition. On the other hand is Ayane. While I understand her role as a tragic character, it just seems to be underplayed. True, she's a big part of the movie, she just doesn't seem anywhere as interesting as Mrs. Sagi was, or is. For the second half of the film, she's either comatose or glaring all the time. She just doesn't say much, nor do much. Lastly is Tatsunari Moribe, aka Ineffectual Man, a character whose sole existence, at least in my mind, was to provide exposition into Iris' background. I could be wrong about that, but he seemed almost entirely useless for the movie. He could have been completely left out, I think. As has been with the last two Gamera movies, Gamera is what he is, and that doesn't change much. However, this film does seem to do things a little bit differently. I mentioned earlier about Gamera disregarding human life. I might have stretched that a little bit. In his fight with the two gals, he does kill a lot of innocent people. While this is obviously not intentional because during the same battle, he saves the life of a small boy. Here's how I see it. The loss of human life in that battle was unavoidable. The Gauss fell into a major metropolitan area. He had to eliminate it, and with almost no warning of the Kaiju's appearance, there was no time to evacuate the citizens. Gamera did what it had to do to eliminate the greater threat. While he faces the consequence of those actions later in the film, I don't discredit him for what he did. If you put these kinds of films in a more realistic scenario, which isn't realistic to begin with, I'm pretty sure plenty of other good kaiju and henshin characters have killed far more innocents while saving the world. The reason you don't see that is because events such as those aren't elaborated on, cataloged, or considered as well as they are in this film. Aside from that little bit, he's still the same kick-ass turtle as ever, but now he has a fire punch attack. The Gauss have several appearances in the film, with only two being of any significance. Any humans killed by them is either done off camera or implied, but they are the same as they've always been. Iris is a whole nother story. As you may remember in the first of the Heisei Gamera trilogy, Gammy bonded with Misasagi through a talisman in order for him to gain enough strength to defeat the first batch of Gauss. However, after succeeding, Gammy split ties with Asagi. This time, the roles were kind of reversed. Ayane gets a similar trinket with Iris, using it to bond with her. But it even goes a step beyond that, going as far as assimilating her into itself. I imagine that it speeds up the creature's growth. It also establishes that Iris is in fact some kind of Gauss, or at least related to Gauss. Ayane mentions that Iris and her are the same because Gamera killed both of their families. Iris could be a precursor or even a prototype of a new model Gauss that was never finished properly. Of course, this is just speculation. Because it lacks a mouth, it uses its tendrils to fire its laser projectiles. It can also absorb energy and materials into itself using a similar method, to the point that it actually copies Gamera's fireball ability later on in the film. Every aspect of the special effects are cranked up. Suits, explosion, and hell, even the CGI isn't that bad this time around. The Gamera suit looks amazing. I like the more menacing look they give him. It really goes with the feel of the film. A very big contrast to what a lot of folks think about when they think of the big turtle. When they're not being substituted for CGI, the Gauss prop also looks very solid. Can't tell any huge improvements from the first film, but I imagine it's there. Iris is probably one of the most impressive pieces, mainly in the adult form, in costume and CGI. Maybe it's because of the radical form of the creature or how elegant they can make the tentacles look, but it's really amazing at times. Everything else special effects wise is an A+ for this type of film, especially this one scene, which is one of the best transition / tension building scenes I've ever seen in a movie. Take a look. guess there isn't a whole lot I can say about the film that hasn't already been said by pretty much everyone else in the world. Gamera 3 is top to bottom a grade A kaiju film. Truly one of the greatest in the genre. The whole trilogy is something that truly stands out, not as monster movies, but as great movies all around. And I'm really glad it actually stopped at the third film. It's a great high point to end the Heisei trilogy. Now I know some folks here will call foul on me if I don't mention the fan-made fourth Gamera film by Shinpei Hayashida. But as I said, it's fan-made and technically not part of the continuity. The film will also not be reviewed, as it's pretty hard to get a copy of it since Kadokawa has been keeping it under lock and key from what I hear. Speaking of availability, the original US DVDs for this entire series were released by ADV. But that was some time ago, and they can be a little hard to find sometimes or cost a little more than they really should. Fortunately for Blu-ray owners like myself, Mill Creek has released the first two Gamera movies of this trilogy on Blu-ray in a double pack. It's actually pretty cheap, so I own it, and it's very good. And speaking of that, actually at the end of this September, they're going to be releasing the third film with some bonus features on Blu-ray as well. So, something to look forward to if you'd like to see these movies in high definition. So please, folks, do your best to support these official releases. One more thing. There isn't a whole lot of kaiju on kaiju fighting in this film, but ignore I said that because you won't even notice it while you're watching it. The movie is that good. At this point, I don't really think I need to say anything nor praise this film any more than it already has been. Go watch it. I give it 5 million out of 5 stars. You will not be disappointed. And lastly, one more movie to go.
Next time on KMR.
What's that noise?
I don't know. Spiders. I told them to bring me one, and I'd believe it.
Well, I can't say I blame you, Sheriff. But Flynn's still missing.
Deep into caverns whose very air is putrefied by the stench of death. They search ceaselessly for a missing man, or possibly a giant spider no one really believes exists, except the high school teacher who knows his science and his students.
There may be more giant spiders coming into the world. They may even be hatching from their eggs in some remote spot right now. Do you realize how easy it would be for them to overcome us humans?
A horrifying spectacle. Its existence shocks and fascinates the world of science. Its gigantic claws capable of crushing a man or tearing a woman apart as if she were a fly. But nothing sends the cats like the presence of out-of-this-world horror. A heart-stopping experience that defies man's imagination, that shrinks every woman's skin with the tension of terrifying withdrawal, as if 1,000 spiders were taking possession of her body. You'll never believe it until you see it. You'll never forget the touch of the spider